Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started here, everyone. My name's Vince. I just want to welcome you to this presentation of Novedge's Best of the Best webinar series. We're excited today not only to present ZBrush, but to have Paul Gaboury on board presenting. We also have Solomon Blair, who's also from Pixologic, who will be helping out fielding some of the questions as they come in. Before we get started, I just want to give a little background on Paul. He's Pixologic's 3D application engineer who's worked with several studios, including Legacy Effects, Disney Animation, Bad Robot, and Pixar. He's worked to enhance the digital sculpting pipeline using the leading industry application, ZBrush, which we're all about to see. He's also involved with the development of ZBrush and working with artists around the world offering support. As part of the Pixologic team, Paul will travel to various schools and studios giving demos on ZBrush to highlight the various new tools in ZBrush. Additionally, Paul graduated with a BFA from the University of Bowling Green and was an extension student at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects. So needless to say, Paul is truly the best guy we could get to present for us today. We're lucky to have him on board. Paul's going to speak for about the next 40 minutes or so. During that time, everyone will be in listen-only mode, but please feel free to shoot your questions into the question box. At the end, we'll open it up for a Q&A, and we'll get to as many questions as time allows. Before we get started, I just want to throw this out there. We will be recording this webinar, and it will be made available to everyone. I'll give complete details on where you can find it as soon as we're done. But having said that, I want to turn it over to Paul so we can get right into it. Paul, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I'm going to switch the screen to you, and you can take it from there.
Hey, let me show my screen. Okay, you can see my screen just fine?
Yeah, looks great.
Yep, got a nice little furry dog here. Very proud of him. Hey, so guys, so welcome. Love that picture of me. Such a good one. Love it. But yeah, like Vince said, by all means, feel free to throw the questions away. Solomon will be monitoring that because I won't be able to really look at both as we're going along. So thanks for coming out and taking the time during the day to be here. So I want to touch base a lot on, obviously, the new features in the ZBrush 4 R2B, which we just released 2 weeks ago. So this is perfect timing for this webinar, of course, for you guys. For those who are using it, I'm going to go through some FiberMesh stuff. I'm going to go through some MicroMesh. I want to touch base on one of my favorite tools, which is the curve mode. So what I'm going to be covering, and I'm going to do this kind of on an on-purpose thing. So we obviously have ZBrush Central for those of you in this meeting. I'm sure you're aware of this. So for this new release, we've been putting videos up on ZBrush Central right here. So this is going to be a spot where you guys can go back and reference to, because I'm going to start covering pretty much stuff in this video that I covered. So this is going to be another source for you guys to go back after this meeting too. You can go back here and watch these videos again and again and again on our site. And then this will be part of the new Z Classroom, which will be launching soon. So I want to touch base on these features. So let's start with the fun, handy-dandy little FiberMesh. So we're going to do 80% stand-up comedy for me and 20% ZBrush. So here we go with my first joke, which was a bad one. So let's see what we can do with this. So obviously FiberMesh, the big difference between the FiberMesh. So what I've done is just pulled up a practice dog that we have here within our projects. So I want to just take a look at how you can start creating these fibers so you guys get a basic understanding of the way this is working. So for those who have not started really playing with the fibers, I'm going to turn off the floor just for broadcasting purposes. How's the broadcast? I'm moving my dog around. Everything's fine? We're not jumpy any at all?
No, it looks great.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing, for those that are using it, one thing you guys will want to take a look at, I see a lot of renders going up in ZBrush Central. It's super exciting to see that. You guys want to also look at what material you're using when you start rendering out. And I'll touch base on that, but with 40 minutes, I really just want to start diving into features. So what's great about this is instantaneous polygons. So these are actually polygons, which once I hit the preview mode, we're just viewing our fibers. So obviously at any point in time, I can change the max number of fibers I want, which I've just done there. One slider that I really want to point out too is this by area slider. Okay, so you have a by mask and by area. So what this is going to do for you, when I start, say, masking out a portion of our dog and we hit preview, you're only going to get fibers in the masked area because I'm telling it by mask. But what this by area slider is doing is looking at the underlining polygons. So if I turn on polyframe mode, okay, there are smaller polygons here, and then there's larger polygons here. So what the by area is doing is taking a look at the actual size of the polygons. And if you notice, the fibers are a little bit shorter and smaller here than right here. So if I turn this off, you see that all the fibers are pretty much coming the same size. So that's all that by area is done. So I wanted to point that out because I see a lot of people on ZBrush Central trying to figure out certain things that are happening to them. So that's a key slider. And in fact, I've used that slider a lot for things I've done. The other thing I want to point out, obviously, we know length. Okay, we have length changing that we can have on the fly. You want to play with these sliders here on the right too, because this is variation. So do I want to have any length variation? So I put the 0, absolutely no length variation. And then, of course, by default, we have it set at having length variation because it's more of a natural look to it. Now, the coverage is more of how wide do you want these fibers to be. Okay, so we're just going to be using these features. So normally when I start, I like to turn my twist off, so I'm just looking straight at my fibers and play with a little bit of a length to get something that we have going here. Now, the gravity setting, so you guys are aware of this, it's dependent on your document, okay, and where the model is sitting in your document. So for example, if I turn the model like this, and then I go to update my gravity, you can see that the fibers now are all flowing towards the front of the dog, so it looks like he's been in an accident or something, or splashing in water, okay? So when I do this, you can see the fibers are going to flow down towards the bottom of my document. Okay. The other thing that I want to point out, and then we'll start having some more fun, is this profile slider and the segment slider. Okay. So these are really actually two key sliders, and for me mostly, except when we go in to make a look at taking how to build the tree, this profile slider I actually keep at 1 pretty much all the time, because it's going to make it easier for me when I start using Grooming Brushes to be able to move and manipulate my fibers. Because when you start turning this up, number one, you're going to get a warning that's telling ZBrush, hey, you're going to get faster reaction keeping this at 1. So, okay, yeah, I get that. But you're going to see what happens to the fibers. Because I've changed to 4, it now becomes more of like a cube base, right? So there's more faces there in essence, which creates more polygons for you, okay? And then your segment controlling how many actual polygon segments that you have here. So obviously, if I start turning this up, I'm going to start getting more and more segments, which will help me give a little more of the flow to the fiber by adding more segments. So you're going to want to play with this, especially when you start doing hair. The reason why I keep this profile slider at 1, the key thing to understand about the fibers is there's really 2 sections here, okay? So you have a section here that's during the creation process, and then you have a section here that's really during the rendering process. So this is why I like to keep this at where I'm at. So once I hit accept here, you're going to see that this all grays out. What we've done is just created fibers below the dog. So when I click on this, we're now just only looking at our fiber subtool. And you notice that when I open FiberMesh, all the creation sliders are grayed out, yet these sliders are not. So when I start rendering things off with the BPR render, I can now adjust things. And the reason why I keep my profile 1, you can see that these kind of have that tube-like look to them. Because if you notice right here, there's a size slider of 4. So here's where I can actually tell, in essence, my profile to be whatever number I want. I can change this to 6 if I want to. I can even change the radius and say I don't want it to be 1. I want it to be maybe 0.3 radius, so it's not so large, and then re-render that out. This is why I like to keep the profile at 1. If you don't keep the profile at 1, you're taking this advantage away from you. The only time I start changing my profile is when we start getting into later on in this webinar, which is with creating the tree. Okay? So that's a nice little overflow. And the other thing that I just want to touch base on, so you guys are aware of what this does. Right now you can see that I have the hair material selected, so I have a nice little shimmerness happening to the hair. These right here, the root anisotropic and the tip anisotropic, will help with that. So the higher I start turning these both up, the more of a shimmer there's going to be to the fibers. So they get a little more shinier. So in essence, what's happening is the fiber normals are laying on top of each other, and that's what this is forcing that to do. So you get a little more shimmer in the hairs. Obviously, I'm dealing with really large and few fibers, so I'm not getting that exact look that we're looking for. Okay? So one other thing that I want to touch base on with this is masking becomes important. Okay? And what I mean by that, and I'm gonna switch material so you guys can see better on this, and let's go more like this. So when I'm masking something out, and say the dog, okay, so if I'm masking here, this is 100%. If I turn down my mask RGB and just do that, okay, so now it might help if I have a less of a mask here, this is going to make a difference from when I'm creating fibers. So this is 100%, 100%, and then that was at about 11%, okay? So when I hit preview, you can clearly see that there's a difference in the fibers, okay? So 100 to 100%, and you can see with less masking, I create less number of fibers in that area, and you can see the size will also be varied because of the intensity of the masking. So this is a really cool way to control certain things. So for an example, if I grab, say, something like our demo head, and we start looking at, well, I want to put, say, some hair on here, right? Maybe I want to put hair at 100% up here, okay? So we just mask off really quickly up here. All right, so we'll get something just as a start base here. And then I say, okay, well, now I want to put some facial hair, or maybe I want to put a little bit lighter masking in here, okay? So what I like to do is drop the mask a little bit. Then I'll just start slowly masking in this area and around. So I'm going to net a nice transition in here. And then once I've done this, the last thing that sometimes I really find creates a really nice flow of fibers is I go ahead and blur my mask. So I'm giving that natural blur. So of course, when I go create those fibers, I'm going to start getting variation. We'll put the length down, and let's get rid of the gravity so we can take a look in the twist. So you can see the difference in the fibers because of my masking approach. Okay? So this is a really strong feature to be able to start doing particular things with your fibers. So I would definitely go ahead and take a stab at that and see what that does for you. When you're doing hair too, I know in our documentation we made recommendations. The human head actually, and we did do some research here, we're scientists in a way, will gauge between about 80,000 to around, I think, about 180,000 actual hair follicles, depending on hair color, believe it or not. So usually I like to start around that number, the max fiber number of 80, and then I like to start doing the renders, which of course, because we haven't actually hit accept to make the fibers, we can just render this out and take a look at it and continue on with where we're at. So this is really cool to be able to do this. It's a great feature within ZBrush to be able to manipulate and change things. So I just wanted to start with that basic knowledge of looking at fibers, because don't forget, you can also change your colors, right? So I can start have a base tip red, and then let's get crazy and put the tip blue, and I can say how much of that red do I want to start coming through, how much less of the do I want of the blue coming through. So it becomes really cool. So we'll go with a little less fibers and do a quick render. So you're able to do things like that, where you can actually control your color based on what you're selecting for your two tip colors. Now, the benefit of having fibers and keeping them as fibers within ZBrush, so when I go ahead, and there's our render, and I create and accept these, okay? ZBrush is asking me, do I want to put in fast preview mode? Okay, I'm gonna say no. I like my I don't know what we're making here, but he's cool. Okay, this is fibers, so ZBrush appreciates this. So this is when we started introducing all these new groom brushes. So I want to highlight a couple of brushes that I really like. I really like what the groom hair toss will do. So this is a great brush to just move the hair around and literally toss it around. I'm on the standard brush. There we go. So I can move my hair around and toss it around. Okay. I really like what that brush does, so I can do some manipulation really quick here. So these brushes are taking on, all these groom brushes are understanding that this is a fibers. So when you subdivide fibers, you now make them not fiber mesh as far as ZBrush is considered. So if you guys start subdividing your fibers, or you're cutting away fibers, you're doing polygroup and delete and hidden, you're converting the fibers into a polymesh, and now the grooming brushes won't appreciate them as fibers. So what I'm touching base on is a new setting, which is right here in FiberMesh. So when you start touching and playing with your groom hair or any of the groom brushes, these controls are telling ZBrush that we're dealing with fibers themselves. So another brush that I really like to use is the Groom Blower, and I also like to use the Groom Brush 1. Now what I like to do with this brush is when we start combing, it's almost like a comb, okay? In fact, here, let's open up a little more hair. So I'm going to go back to our dog here. It has a lot of hair. Okay, so I have a lot of hair on this dog, right? So if I go to a little bit bigger brush size and I start combing it, you can kind of see we're getting in here 3 strands. That's being controlled by this alpha. So what I actually like to do to make this feel more like an actual brush that we would all use on our hair is I like to go in the alpha palette, and in the modifiers, I like to jump this up to something like 12 or 14 or something crazy. So then you're adding more of span, so then this acts more like literally a brush that you would use on ourselves. So this is what I like to do for when I'm playing with the hair. How's the feedback that we have here, just to make sure we're getting good good feedback?
Yeah, it looks good on my end.
Yeah. Okay. Nate, is there any questions that I need to answer at this point in time, or I'm good to go? Can just continue on?
You're good so far.
Awesome. Okay, so definitely I encourage you to play with these brushes, but then take a look at things that you can do, like the blower brush. Okay, if I turn that alpha down, I found that this is the alpha we're using, and it's really blowing the hair around, just like, you know, if you had a hair dryer, right? I found turning that alpha up as well really made some cool way for me to really stretch out the hair and comb at the same time. Okay, so I would encourage you to take a look at these brushes and play with them. Okay, so I want to touch base on a couple brushes that do some really crazy stuff. For example, the Groom Twist. It's really twisting the fibers, as you can see here. What we encourage you to do is take a look at where your brush is, let the brush gather the hair, and then just pull out. Okay, so again, the key to this brush is focus on the area and then just slowly move out, and then you're going to get really what the brush is about. It's not so much about doing this, just trying going down the whole dog. It's more about looking at certain sections of the dog and adding a twist. So gather the hair first and then move out. So a lot of these brushes that you guys might have been playing with, like the spikes, the knot, and spiral, that's kind of more how they're working, because then those brushes are now introducing the twist settings that are in our brush palette. Okay? So let's move on and see some other really cool features of what we can do with this. So I'm going to load another project, and just so you guys know, we have new tools shipped with this version. So we have this earthquake model from our nod. And then in the tool palette, we have a new female figure, Julie. We also have a new model male figure, and then we have a female anatomy figure as well. Okay? So I'm going to load this guy right here. We're going to say no. I don't want to save out my awesome dog, shaggy dog. All right? Let's take a look at just him. So let's put some hair on him and see what we can do with this. Okay, so I'm just going to knock down a 1 polygon level. Okay, holding the masking brush, okay, before I start to do anything, I'm going to go to the morph target. I'm going to delete the morph target that's already on this guy, and I'm going to store a morph target. Okay, so then I'm going to say, well, no, let's put some hair, maybe kind of a mohawk kind of thing that's happening. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and put that here, and then I'm going to put some more masking here, and then I'm going to inverse my mask. So what I'm going to do now is just start sculpting out where I want hair to be. So I like to switch to the clay buildup, and my alpha is still on right now, so we're going to turn that back down. And we can either start doing this, where we start controlling and building up what we're doing. Okay, so I'm slowly building up my surface, all right, and then I can control my surface here, and then here as well. And then I like to switch also to, obviously we can switch to things like the move brush, right, and start manipulating this hair and make it have a little bit of a twist to it, all right? So what I want to do now is take advantage of having a morph target, okay? So within the FiberMesh, okay, we have a way to do certain things. So I'm going to switch my morph target back to just a regular mesh. Then I'm going to turn on preview. We're going to get craziness, right, happening. I'm going to turn on the morph target tangent, and you can see what happens. What we're doing is giving you fiber meshes between where the surface has changed from where it's bald to where I made the difference. So here, we'll turn off gravity, and we'll turn off a variation to really see this. And let's make the coverage a little bit bigger and less fibers, and we'll add some color here so we can really see what is happening with this guy. So you can see what's happening is we're just using the difference between the bulb head and the head that I made the adjustment changes on. So this becomes a really cool way to start manipulating and changing things. So obviously myself, I started really playing with this, and this feature was just like, wow, this is really fun and cool to be able to play with. So I started just taking things like this guy and saying, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and store a morph target on that, and then just start using the clay build-up to really build up. And what was great is I didn't really care about the geometry, because I know that's going to be, you know, we got a little ongoing joke here in the office. You don't like what you got, put some fiber on it. So this is obviously just a disaster. I don't know, it's become a woman with a weave, Marge Simpson-like, right? So then I just switch, right? Then I can turn on my fibers, and then I can turn on morph target, and then there you go. So it's a really quick way to start going here, and then of course we can start playing with our gravity settings, having less or more gravity, and then how many fibers do we want, and our coverage. So you can see we can really quickly start to make some really cool hair designs using these couple features. And then of course when I accept it, and let's say yes this time, so you can see fast preview mode. So I'm going to toggle down. We're now in fast preview mode. Okay, so I can drop this slider and I look at less fibers, or I can look at more fibers in fast preview mode. It's just going to give you the capability to, when we start doing things with the grooming brushes, there's less hair to have to manipulate. So you can see we can start doing what we want to this. And then when we come off fast preview, it updates to the real hair. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can use the fibers maybe to do other things besides like hair or fur or parts of clothing. So I'm just going to grab a plane, okay, here that we have. I'm going to turn that into a polymesh. Really quickly, I'm just going to mask off the center here, and I'm going to turn on preview. Okay, I'm going to knock this slider all the way down to 1, so I'm only dealing with one fiber. Okay, so it's going to look like a jumbleness. So I know how gravity works now. Okay, so I'm going to tell gravity to go 100%. I'm going to tell the length to be 100%. So now you can see I start building one piece of geometry. Now this is where I actually want to use the profile. I want to have something that's more cube. I'm just going to say skip that. So now I'm start getting a nice little base. Then I say, you know what, I want more segments, because I know I'm going to turn this into a physical piece of geometry. So you can see with more segments, you can see how much twisting is actually happening from this twist. So I don't want this much twist happening. I want way less twist. That looks a lot better for me. So now I say accept, okay, and then I have a fiber, okay. I can say, you know what, I don't like this one. I can delete it, go back to this fiber, click on that plane and hit, and we got the same thing, because maybe what I want to do is also change the way this is flaring out, because I want to change in the flare, and I want, where do you want that flare to take place? Okay, so I have less of a flare happening. Maybe I don't want as much coverage because it's a smaller tree. It's not such a big tree. Okay, then I accept that. And I'm just hitting the down arrow key right now to switch between my subtools. So of course we can hold the Alt key and click on the subtools like I just did here. But really quickly I'm just clicking on the arrow key. So now I have a start to something that I wanted. Okay, so let's turn off that plane. So the only thing we're looking at is this tree. So this is a time where I do want to subdivide and get more geometry. So the first thing you notice, if I turn on my display properties and I turn on double, we've got a complete opening on the bottom. So we've got a new close algorithm here in geometry. So I'm going to close that hole off, and you can see what happens. We just create two triangles, which is fine for me. It's going to be my base. It's probably going to be sitting in the ground anyway. Works for me. You don't have to close it off. I just decided to do it. And then we're going to just divide up. That way I've got a little bit more polygons to work with here. The reason why I'm going to do that is because now I want to use this object as a piece. So let me fill this guy with some color. Okay? I want to now say, hey, from this point up, I want to use this masking. And I want to now go back to my fibers, turn on preview, okay, and tell ZBrush, I only want you to create fibers where this mask is. Okay, so now I'm starting to create some branches to my trees. Okay, so we can put a little more coverage because these are maybe bigger branches. Then I want to start playing with these settings. Okay, So right now my gravity is just way too high. Okay, and then I can start playing with my H tangent, which is changing my tree along a tangent space, okay, through horizontally changing the tangent. Then I'm going to say, well, let's put a little bit more length in there, okay. So now I got some branches here on the top of my tree. So let's go ahead and accept those. And remember, again, I'm hitting the down arrow key, so I'm selecting that third subtool now that we just made, which are my larger branches. Now I'm going to say, let's make some on top of those. So, whoa, we got a huge mess. That's because of how many fibers we got, right, and the length we got. So I'm going to say we need them way shorter, way, way, way shorter. And the coverage cannot be that big. We're going to go a lot smaller, and I want more branches. So you can see now I've just added those little branches onto this tree. So we're creating a really cool, dead-looking tree at this moment, but it's still really cool to have fun and play with this. And here's Weeping Willow. All right, so yeah, let's play with that a little bit. All right, then we say, that's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to accept those. We're going to select that subtool again. I'm hitting the down arrow key, and I've selected that subtool. Now I want to put some leaves on this. Okay, so this is also where I touch base on not subdividing and things like that. So remember this tree trunk here. We subdivided. So as far as ZBrush is considered, that is no longer a FiberMesh. It is actual PolyMesh. I want to keep the thing that it is an actual fiber, because we have other controls. In our masking, we have fiber mask and fiber on mask with an actual curve, okay? So that becomes important. And then also in our UV map, you can add fiber UVs instantly to all your fibers. So this is why you want to make sure you know what you're doing. You don't want to just convert the fibers into something else, okay? So now that I have that selected, let's go ahead and let's start putting some leaves on this. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is use this advantage. I'm going to move this curve up, and I'm going to fiber mask, and then I'm just going to inverse it. And then we're going to go ahead and throw some leaves on this. And let's put some color in this so we can see what we're doing. All right, so we got some green in here. We'll get maybe a little bit lighter green in here. I definitely don't want them this long. Okay, I definitely want way more of these. I definitely want to change the coverage to make bigger leaves. So let's take a really close look in here and see what we got what we're making here. Okay? So you can see I'm making the coverage bigger, and I still don't like where we're at with this. I'm also going to drop the profiles down. In fact, I can put them at 1, because remember, if I put it at 1, I can now use the advantage of my rendering features. So now I have my profile at 1 again. All right? Maybe not so many segments. Let's make it way shorter. So let's go adjust our length. Okay? Not so long on the length. Now here's where I want to change. Where do I want the leaves to flare? Do I want to flare more towards the tip? Do I want them for more towards the root, or more in the middle? I definitely want them in the middle, and now I can start playing with this slider to see how wide do I want them to be and how much flare do I want to have in my leaves. So you can see just with a couple changes what we can do with this, right? So now that I have something that I like, I can go ahead and hit accept, okay, and I'm going to say no, and then let's see what we have here. And then voila, we made a nice little weeping willow tree right here for you guys. So really cool that you can take fibers on top of fibers and build things and create, like we could make roots on the bottom of the tree and things like that, okay? So I want to move on to some other stuff, which is the MicroMesh, because this is also some really fun, cool stuff. So we've been talking about fibers. So what we can also do with the fibers, if I load this project right here, okay, you can see what we've done is just created fibers and made them so they're all the same size and made a model, which is a leaf, okay? So in this leaf tool, you'll see that we put a plane back here, because this will give you a visual representation what this leaf would look on, one polygon, okay? So the thing I really want to point out here, if we render this out really quick, and this will take about 10, 15 seconds, you can see how quick it's going on my computer. It's really not taking that long. Okay, so I have this, and voila, what we've done is we replaced the fibers with that leaf. Now the key thing here is we're stretching the leaf is under here, under the Select MicroMesh, we select the leaf. Okay, let me load something that I started having some fun with. So I'm going to open up a new project here. And let's see, we got this one. Okay, so what I started doing is saying, hey, let's just wrap my head around this. What if I started using it more in this sense, okay, where I have individual polygons on a sphere. And I said, how cool would it be to see something like this where it's some diamond kind of gem thing replace all the polygons. Now the thing I want you to notice here is this is sitting at 519,000 polygons, and then this is sitting at 386 polygons. So to understand what ZBrush is going to render out, you got to multiply 386 times 519,000, and that's how much polygons ZBrush has to render out. So for what I'm doing, I'm like, this is just a hard edge model shape. I don't need to really concern myself with this polygon count as long as I can just hold the form that I want. So of course I went in and started using the decimation master, and you can see that I dropped it to 3,000 polygons. So I'm going to load that gem, okay, that I made. Okay, so now I'm sitting at 3,000 polygons instead of 519. So now you want to multiply that number by this sphere, and I'm going to go down here and select the new one, which is my gem piece here. And now I've just told ZBrush, hey, I want you to use this to render out on this. Then you need to make sure that you turn on Draw MicroMesh. And then so we'll render this out and see what we get. So this, again, this will take about 10 seconds. So the difference here is if I rendered out with that 519,000 diamond gem thing, it's not going to take 10, 15 seconds. It's going to take probably more like 4 or 5 minutes. But there's no difference in the render at all. Okay, so here's my render. I have made some adjustments in the rendering properties with my shadows. I've also went ahead and played with our filtering system because we have a ton new filters. And you can see here I'm using 4 different filters. I'm using Sharpen, I'm using Orton, I'm using a blue, and I'm using a gamma as well with that pinkish color tone selected. Notice that this mask slider is up on all of them, which is telling ZBrush only to apply it to this surface. Okay? So what if, thinking about this, I was like, okay, well this is cool. Now that I understand that when I'm dealing with just straight up polygons, MicroMesh is going to replace each individual polygon. But when I'm dealing with fibers, even though my fiber had maybe 5 polygons in one fiber, it's not doing the same thing. It's stretching along the fiber. So then I went, well, let me take this one step further. Let's take some of that new stuff that was in the feature that we had for ZBrush 4R2, which is we really took off with the insert brushes with DynaMesh. And I want to cover that as well. I don't know how we're doing on time. How are we doing on time, by the way?
We got about 25 minutes left, so.
Perfect. We're doing good.
Yeah.
We're doing good. We're doing good. Okay, so I want to start saying, okay, how about if I just made my own brush that kind of I have control to do what I want to do with, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and grab the insert sphere. I'm going to take our plane again that we have here, all right? I'm going to make that a polymesh. So if I turn on my polyframe mode, you can see how many polygons this has. So if you remember what I just did in the demo, I did a actual micromesh to this. Every single one of these faces is going to get that little gem. I don't want that. I want to use this to control where I want to put the gems. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and under geometry, I'm going to reconstruct all the way down to when we just have one face. Okay? So now I just have one face. I'm going to delete the higher because I don't need them. Okay? Then in this insert brush, I am now going to tell ZBrush, instead of using a sphere, let's use this plane that I just made. And you're going to see that the icon automatically updates. Okay? And just so you know, at any point in time, you want to change your icon. That's what this select icon does. Okay? And if you notice that I just changed the icon, what I'm doing is I'm holding the Alt key, and then that's telling ZBrush to recapture your document to create the icon. Okay? So now I have this brush, okay, and then I started going above and beyond. I said, you know what, let's load something else. Let's load a flower. So here's a flower I made using DynaMesh with my curve mode feature that I'm going to dive into next. We can pretty much reconstruct this flower. And then again, I I decimated this down. This was normally almost like, this was 1.5 million, I think, when I made it. So I put it at 77,000 polygons. Okay? So let's just grab something simple just so you guys can see what this does. Let's just grab a sphere. So I'm going to grab a polysphere here. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete the lower because to use an insert brush, I cannot have subdivision levels. Of course, what I could have done as well is I could have froze my subdivision levels. So for this, I'm just going to go ahead and delete them. All right? And then I'm just going to click and drag where I want planes to be. Now, I'm just going to grab a couple. I'm going to make various sizes of these so you guys get an idea of what's happening. Okay? So I'm going to turn on polyframe mode. Obviously, our sphere is red, and the other ones have different polygroups to them. I'm going to select just the sphere. So the only thing I'm looking at is my sphere. I'm going to go to Subtools, and I'm going to click the Split Hidden. I actually like using Split Hidden more than the Group Split, because the Group Split, instead of making two subtools, the Group Split would have made each one of the planes their own subtool plus the sphere. I don't want to do that. I just want to make all the planes their own subtool and the sphere its own subtool. So I really like using the Split Hidden. Okay? Now I'm going to go back to these planes, okay? And I'm going to go all the way back down here to my display properties. And I'm going to tell ZBrush, hey, let's select a micromesh. And this time, let's select that flower. All right? We, of course, want to make sure in the render properties, again, that our draw micromesh is on. Okay, so let's do a render and see what happens. And you can see my render is going pretty quick. It's a flower, and we're going to get every plane is going to be replaced by a flower. So let's turn off polyframe mode so that you guys can actually see a better look of what's happening. So you can see that the flower sizes are being dependent based on my plane. You might also notice that you probably should be saying, hey, why is this color information not coming on the planes? You have to turn on the planes, you have to turn on polypaint right here, which is colorize, which all I did is clicking this button. It's the same thing as clicking this button as clicking this right here. Okay? So now when I render out, the flowers are going to have color to them. And of course, I painted them separately by themselves. And right now, my filters are coming into play. So this is really cool. So this is how I started thinking outside the box. And now I have an insert plane brush that I would save out from here on out, and I always have it, and I know exactly what it's going to do. So it's really cool to be able to manipulate and change those things for sure. Do we have I'm going to take a swig of water here. Do we have any questions that I might need to field before I dive into the next part of the webinar?
You're doing okay so far.
We're good so far?
Yep.
No one's saying anything? I'm that boring? I'm not that exciting?
There's definitely questions. You're doing such a great job.
Okay. No, it's all right. I have tears in my eyes. I'm crying. It's okay. Give me a moment. I'm a little bit cleansed right now. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Okay, so I want to touch base on a couple other little features that we have with inside the new ZBrush, okay? One thing that I want to touch base, let me load another tool that we have here. So I'm going to load this tool that Steve Jubenville made. It's a personal project of his. And taking a look at having some fun here with fibers and this woman with her jacket. I want to take a look at just her jacket, okay? So we're only going to turn that on. And if you notice here, I've got a nice change in color to the materials that I have, okay? And you also notice there's polygrouping to this. Well, how I did this, because this didn't come to me like this. This is not how I got it from Steve. So what I did was switch to the new Transpose Smart brush. In the move mode, I'm going to hold down the control key, and when I start dragging out, you can see we start building a mask based on surface change. So this is almost like a little bit what you see in Spotlight. Now, if you don't get the whole thing, don't worry about it. You just hold down your control and your shift key, and then we're going to add to that growing. So this is how I did this. This is exactly how I started building this out. And then I also started using another new feature. So when you get this, oh, I'm overdoing it, just bring it back a little bit. You might have to do a couple clicks, but I never was able to do this before. So I'll be happy doing a couple clicks, definitely for sure, because trying to do this before would not have been a lot of fun at all. Okay? So then what we've added also to this, to make things easier for you, in our polygrouping, we now have a group mask, group unmask, okay, and a group mask and clear. So these are pretty much the identical thing, except this will clear the mask. So it's going to look at the mask and create a new polygroup. And then this is going to clear it. So it's going to do the same thing to clear it. And then group unmask means whatever is unmasked, give it a new polygroup. So we'll do something like that. And then now, as you can see, I can start assigning new polygroups. Okay? So I wanted to highlight that because that's also controlling in the new masking options. There's new a mask by smart, which this is surface. So you notice it's masking off the surface change here, which is along the seams. And of course, if I inverse it, you can see that now everything else is masked off but the seams. So if I went to say something like deformation, and I started inflating, you can see that just those seams are inflating. We're actually looking at the surface change. So this becomes really handy when you start doing hard edge things, right? So I just wanted to highlight those before I start diving into some DynaMesh and some other things in the curve mode because it's one of my favorite modes. And we're going to change some projects because this brightness is just getting to me, how I've set this up. Okay, so looking at DynaMesh and looking at certain things. So there's a lot of times where, hey, I can't change my geometry and I want to manipulate something. Let's say I came to you and I'm your director or your art director and say, hey, this is really great, Paul, but you know what? We've kind of changed the design of this guy. And he's going to have some horns or he's going to have something else happening to him, longer teeth, bigger ear, something, okay? But you can't change the actual polygon flow. This is production. You can't touch around the face, but you can go ahead and touch from the hairline back. But that's about it. The blend shapes have been done. I can't have you touching that. Cool, no sweat. So now within the geometry, we're going to click on free subdivision levels. And what ZBrush is going to do is hide those three subdivision levels and give us just the lower one. So if I want to actually now put some horns on him, I'm going to switch to just a selection brush. And let's go ahead and just select the lasso brush and lasso out parts of that. And then I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. Another hidden feature that's been around for a while that there's still a lot of people who don't know about it. When you're using the select lasso brush, I can actually do things like this where I just select it off that whole row. Or if you see this, like this. And I can do stuff like this where I'm selecting off that whole roll there. What I'm doing is clicking on the edge when I'm holding down the select lasso. So when I click on that edge, it goes this way. Okay, when I click on this edge, it goes this way. Okay, so I just want to highlight that feature because that's an old feature that seems to be a lot of people still don't know about it, but it comes so in handy. And especially things now I can start doing now in ZBrushes. I can grow out my selection, shrink my selection, right? This becomes really handy. And what I'm doing is in the visibility, I'm clicking these two buttons right here, which you notice the shortcuts are Control-Shift-X to grow, which I remember just by X for expand, and then I got Control-Shift-S for shrink. Okay? I'm going to mask these off, so when I bring everything back, that's the only thing that I have. I'm going to inverse my mask. Okay? I'm going to switch to, I had the Transpose Smart Brush, I'm going to flick to my regular Transpose brush with the move on. Okay? I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm literally going to extrude. So now I'm extruding just like you would in any other application. So I'm adding an edge loop and moving things out. So now I've got geometry there to sculpt on for my horns or whatever they're going to be. Now I need my subdivision levels back, so I'm going to freeze, and then there you go. So now I have all new geometry supporting for horns. Okay? That's cool. Let's take a different scenario. So let's go backwards on this. Okay? Let's go, well, you know what? Do whatever you want. We're in the beginning stages, and we've changed our mind, and we do want horns on this guy. I'm going to turn off the strength of my wax modifier, so we're just looking at him. Okay, let's fill him with just white. Okay, so I want to go ahead and say, you know what? Let's do something crazy. Let's turn this into a DynaMesh. Okay? This is just a base mesh that I'm going to use. Do I want to keep my subdivision levels? Nah, forget it. I don't want them. Okay? So I got something masked off. He's masked off. Okay, so now he's a DynaMesh. All right? DynaMesh automatically closes the holes off. You can control that in the preferences if you want. That's what this is doing right here. Okay? So you notice when you come over here, DynaMesh close holes, you can put it to 0 and it won't close the holes. Then you can tell it to what size triangles and projection, and then you have other features here. So I want to point these out because I haven't seen anybody really diving into those yet. So reason why I want to do this is now I want to switch to where I had fun and I got addicted, and my bosses came to me and said, okay, Paul, you need to stop with this curve mode stuff because you're getting out of hand. Like I was playing with it hours at a time, and we're in the middle of developing other things. So this is going to allow me now to start being able to say, hey, you know what? Let's make a crazy horn. So now I just made a crazy horn. I can edit that horn at any point in time, move it and manipulate it where I want to. Okay? I can change and say, yep, the horn's a little too small. So I'm going to go bigger, change my brush size, click on the horn, and now it's massive. Right? And I can say, yeah, whoa, 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 that's too big, change my draw size, and click there. And I can continue moving this horn where I want it to be positioned. Okay, so that's really cool. Well, what's the next step? This is, I don't want a horn like this where it's all one side thing. Another thing I want to point out with this is being controlled by this brush modifiers. So this cylinder here, how many expands that you're getting here is being set by this modifier. So if I go and say, for example, change this to 4 and then click, you're going to see you only get 4, which is pretty much a cube. So this becomes really handy to start doing some cooler stuff, okay, and even creating it more smooth. Right? The next thing I want to do is I want to go in here in my stroke palette, and I want to turn on size, which then if I touch this curve, we're affecting the size of the curve. So wherever I click, it's going to give me the biggest size and then start tapering down. So I can control that taper with this curve. So I can say make a really big time taper, or let's do some crazy Gideon stuff here and get really crazy and have a fluctuation. Okay? So it's really cool to be able to have that control and then they say, yep, that's what I'm looking for. That's exactly what I want. Let me clear the mask and let me read DynaMesh. And now I have this part of my model. Okay? So what we've done in this feature is taken that same thing. We have a new introduction to a couple new brushes. So we have curve multi-tube. Okay? The difference between that is, say if I drew out a curve and I drew another curve, I can't go back and edit this curve now. I can only edit this curve. Okay? Also remember that if I hit the snapshot button, which the hotkey is number 5, okay, I can also turn bend off, and I can keep making instances of this. Right? So I can hit the 5 key, make another instance, 5 key, make another instance. So it's cool to be able to do that. But what if I want multiple versions of this to manipulate all at once? So again, this is what's new to this version. The curve multi-tube is going to allow me to draw out as many tubes as I want, and at any point in time, I can go back to any of them and change and manipulate them. So this was added to this version thinking about that particular brush that I just brought up. So this is really cool to be able to do this. Okay? So thinking about this, let's see a little bit how I made the flower. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a sphere. I'm going to turn that, I'm going to delete the lowers, and we're just going to turn that into a DynaMesh. Okay? And I'm going to grab the curve tri-fill brush. Okay? I'm going to go into my transform, okay? Turn on my radial, and how many flower petals do I want? Well, let's say 8, okay? So now I'm going to say I want a flower petal to go like this, and then there you go. And then I can start adjusting this flower petal, as you can see here, okay? Now, the one thing I want to point out about this is when I'm making adjustments on the petal, all right, it's happening to all of them. But you notice when I scroll over any of the other petals, nothing happens because these are all instances of this petal. So the one with the little circles here, the white circles here at the end, is the one that I have to edit. Okay, and then I can say, yep, I like that. There you go. It's part of it. And then I just went in and said, okay, let's make some smaller ones. All right, so I said, yeah, let's make some lower ones there. And then I can adjust those, move those how I want to move them. Right? I could even switch to something like this, which is our rotate, and I can move it up. Right? I can tell it to, let's move that down a little bit. And then there you go. So I'm just switching between move and rotate. And then I got a nice little start to the flower, and then I just switched to the middle part. I switched to the sphere, which I've replaced, so I'm going to go in here and replace my spheres, and then I just started drawing out a bunch of these. Okay, and then I turned off symmetry mode and just started randomly putting some to break up, give myself some asymmetry. Right, and then I can just re-DynaMesh that. So this is where, when I did the painting, this is what was cool about the painting. This is when I started using this new masking feature and using this mask by surface. So you can see I can mask out edging and only work on this part. And then I also started playing with my fall off. So I have more of a fall off or less of a fall off. So, and then I can also change my range, okay, and have more of a range to this. So see, I have more masked off. So now if I only want to paint this part, so let's say, for example, let's put this color in the middle, okay, and then you can even blur it a little bit. And we go to color, fill object, okay, inverse it, and then let's grab a totally different color. And let's make it a little blue. There, Bob Ross, there. Okay, and you can see I use that new masking feature to do that. So that's really cool to be able to manipulate and change that. So another thing with these brushes, we've been talking about using multiple instances of this. Let me load another project and show another way that talking with a lot of artists is a great way to make capes or start of clothing or cloth and things like that. So let's go ahead and turn this into a DynaMesh and not keep our subdivision levels. Okay? And I'm going to switch to my curved surface brush. Okay? What this brush is going to do is a little different. I'm going to turn off symmetry mode. Okay? And I'm just going to draw out a curve. And then I'm going to say, you know, I want the next one to go here, and I want the next one to go here, and then I want the next one to go here. And you can see I'm literally creating cloth-like form to this cube. And what's great about this, because we're dealing with the curves again, I can edit this at any point in time. Now, by default, this brush, okay, if I look at my curve stroke, is going to have these settings on. If I want to manipulate any of these points in here, I need to turn this bend option on. So now when I turn that bend option on, okay, I can go in and adjust different parts of those curves, okay? And of course, the thickness of my cloth is controlled by my initial brush size, that I can change that up at any point in time. And I say, yep, I'm liking what I got. Let's clear our mask. Let's re-DynaMesh. And there we go. Now we got nice, clean geometry to get going with and start switching to what I like to start switching to for cloth immediately is the clay buildup brush. So I start seeing a nice flow here, and I start wanting to put in a little bit more of a flow of the overcutting of the cloth here. I start doing this, okay? Then I want to start creating some tension points. Okay, so I'm glad this happened. You guys see that this has holes? There's obviously two things I can do about this. I could switch to, say, something like this inflate brush and then inflate this way up so it starts overlapping and let DynaMesh start healing itself, like I just did right there. Okay? Or I know that the brush that I'm using, this clay buildup brush, is pretty strong. Okay? And I know that the surface I made is really thin. So I'm just going to go in a brush, and I'm going to go in my auto masking, and I'm going to turn on backface masking. So now when I'm using my clay buildup brush, okay, I know I'm only working on the surface that I'm looking at. I'm actually not working on the surface behind it. So if I do this, okay, well, it might help if I had the right brush select when I turn that on. It's usually a helpful thing, guys. I had the inflate brush selected. So when I start sculpting on this, nothing's going to happen to the back. So I know it's doing that. So now I know I'm safe as an artist when I'm working with that feature on, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to be blocking in things and then re-DynaMeshing. Okay? I know I'm going to get a nice, clean result, and then re-DynaMeshing. Okay? And then I really like to use the Dame standard, which was done by Damien Caldera here, to really start, well, let's add some pinching in this and add some pinching in there and re-DynaMesh that. Okay? And then I like to hold the Alt key for this and really put a nice crease line in there, maybe like that, and re-DynaMesh that. Okay? I like to, instead of using the smooth brush here, like I'm doing right now, I like to use the alternate smooth brush, which is when I hold the Shift key, and then I click on my surface and let go of the Shift key, I'm switching to an actual different type of brush. This is more of like a relaxed smooth brush, and I find myself using this smoothing capability probably about 90% of the time now, because it's just it's a smoother, slower movement to the surface. So I would encourage you guys to go ahead and give that a try, because I found it very useful in my workflow. So it's been very, very beneficial for me. So how are we doing on time? Are we pretty much out? We're into the Q&A part, or what?
Yeah, we're going to have to cut the Q&A a little short, but that's fine. You still have some time. If you are done, we could jump right into the Q&A. Unless there was something else you wanted to touch on really quick. I don't mean to cut you off here.
No worries. I prefer being cut off.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we'll just...
information on where we're at, so to what they want to see. So.
Yeah, okay, so I think we'll jump into a couple here. Here's one I found from Shulin. He's wondering, can I tile my custom mesh using insert brush combined with curve mode? That would be useful for creating ropes.
Okay, so wait, you want to tile your insert brush?
Yeah.
Well, the brush in an insert brush is physical geometry, so you wouldn't be able to do that per se. But what you could do, okay, so here I'll give you an example of what you can do. Because when you're using an insert brush, okay, so let's just grab something that's really going to be here. We'll grab the nose. Okay. If I grab this nose and I pull this out, it's a physical piece of geometry that we're doing. Okay, so actually, let's even use something more fun. Let's not use the nose. We'll use brush insert. Let's use the hand. Okay, so I have a hand, right? This is a physical piece of geometry using an insert brush. So what I can do is, maybe this will help you out. I could do this, where I'm going to hold down in the move mode with regular transpose. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and I'm going to duplicate the hand. Okay? Now I'm going to hit the 1 key, the 1 key, the 1 key, the 1 key, and this could go infinity. So now I just use the insert brush and made duplicate hands the same distance apart, equal distance apart. If you were trying to do something with rope, we actually have a rope brush, which is in Lightbox here under brush. If I remember right, it's in patterns. We moved it to, let's see, patterns. I think it's in here if I remember correctly. Yep. So here's a rope brush. So what we did is use an alpha, okay, to make it look like rope, right? And this alpha is rectangle size. And then in the stroke, okay, you can even change the roll distance. Maybe I want this rope to be a little bit tighter. I can say 0.5. And now I can make this rope even tighter. Does that help for what they were asking?
I think so. We'll see. If they put something in later, we'll come back to it. But here's sort of a lengthy question. A bunch of people have been asking about import and export capabilities. For example, with Adobe Illustrator, 3ds Max, Maya. I guess if you could just touch on some of the file types you can bring into ZBrush, and then the types of files you can export to other programs. I don't know if that makes any, if that's clear.
No, we can export. Okay, so first of all, you can export an OBJ by clicking this export button. We also have the plugin, by the way, which is new to this version. We added a lot, and I'm surprised I haven't seen anybody say, "Oh my goodness," because we have added all these advanced options now, where we can import and export STL. So we can export STL, export Vermal and OBJ. Plus now you can import STL. Plus also import STL and OBJ, STL with color information. So there's really two types of color information for STLs. So you have all those options. You can import STLs. You can import OBJs. You can import Maya files. You can import another file extension we have, which is GoZ, and export that. You can export Maya files. Okay. But you also have the capability of just using GoZ. So GoZ, when I click this little button, I'm on the Macintosh side. So here's all the applications we can GoZ with: Sculptris, Photoshop, Modo, Maya, Cinema 4D, and also 3D Studio Max. So with one click of the button, I can send anything over into Photoshop, Maya, or any of these applications. So if I say Maya, and then this model's a little too dense for Maya, so we'll just grab something simpler like the dog. Okay. Now that I have this dog selected, if I hit Go Z, we're automatically going to launch Maya. We're going to bring the dog over. If you had displacement maps on the dog, you had texture maps on the dog, normal maps, we're automatically going to set up the shading network for you as well, and then you're up and running. So Maya takes some time to launch here. But you can see we're already launching Maya. It's just Maya takes a minute to launch. There we go. And so this works the same way with 3D Studio Max, Modo. And if you have Photoshop CS3 or higher, you can actually import the dog. So if I switch this to Photoshop, as long as you're using CS3 or higher, I can go ahead and change that. So that allows me to do a lot of importing, exporting as well. Does that cover that question?
Yeah, that was great. The only thing is, a couple people asked, will you consider making GoZ for Blender? Is that something future releases?
GoZ is something that where there's special applications that we're picking from. I know there's a lot of Blender users, and it's an open source application. We do have an SDK for GoZ, so there are other applications, people like that coding their own GoZ. So I know there's one for Softimage now that was coded by someone to work, and there's a couple other people who have been coding one for other. I couldn't say if we're going to definitely code for Blender for sure. It's tough because when you start coding for all these other applications, then we're also having to do a lot of tech support stuff for other applications. And when we update our software and then they update our software, there's so much updating back and forth. So we decided to take more of a different route and just make an SDK and let them build their own GoZ interface with ZBrush, and then when there are changes, they can go ahead and update that. So I couldn't say for sure. There's a lot of other applications we do have in mind. So I know maybe that's the answer they're looking for, but
no,
other questions
that works. Let's see here. I guess there's a couple questions about more introductory level stuff or lower level stuff. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the resources you guys offer, like the ZBrush Classroom and support community, real quick, so that it helps some people out there.
Yeah, so I touched base on ZBrush Central here. So everything that I've been going through in this webinar is in these videos right here. So you guys can revisit all this stuff that I've been talking about right here in these videos, and I'm currently working on more videos to be added to here. We also, obviously, on Pixologic.com, we have here under the education, we have a Z Classroom portal, which we will be launching a brand new one this month, it's looking like. So, so we have this here. On top of that, when we launched ZBrush 4R2, we had these videos here where there's 17 other movies here, which will be all these videos will be going to Z Classroom, but right now these are sitting here in ZBrush Central. So you can see that there's more videos here for you to have, and then obviously also here in the Z Classroom portal, we have the videos here that you can start. So for a basic new person, this is a great resource right here, this really introduction simple videos. Plus on top of that, if you go under here under our product, okay, and you go to the portal or ZBrush portal itself, under this training section here, there's this official ZBrush training guide right here, getting started with ZBrush. I would download this. This was made when ZBrush 4 came out, so I'm currently updating this. But still, this is going to get you off and running. It's not going to talk about fibers, and it's not going to talk about DynaMesh, but it's really going to get you going and up and running. And of course, with every version, we give you documentation of what's happening and what's new. So let me get to my applications. I'll show you where that is at. Hold on one sec. I got to move the GoToMeeting stuff out of the way. R2. Let's see, documentation. So here you go. So you can see there's documentation all in here. So I'm just in the root folder of R2. okay, which this happens to be R2B that I've changed, and there's a documentation folder as long as you did the full install, and you have all the stuff back from 3.5, R2. There's Z-Sketch stuff in here. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. So just reading this documentation also is training material. So this is a great resource for you on top of that.
Okay, so
questions that you
I think we're going to have to call it there. We're about 5 minutes over the hour. I apologize to everyone that we didn't get to. Again, I would highly recommend checking out ZBrush Central, all the ZBrush resources that are available. Yeah, we have to cut it short because the recording GoToMeeting gets a little fussy if we go over the time we said we were going to use. So I'm just going to switch the screen over to me really quick and then just wrap things up really quick.
Sure.
So again, sorry to everyone that we couldn't get to. I'll shoot everyone an email with my contact info, and Paul, do you mind if I give them your and Solomon's info in case anyone has some questions that they want to ask you?
By all means, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so cool. So yeah, within the next hour or so, I'll shoot everyone an email with contact info and links to get to the ZBrush Classroom site and so forth. So yeah, again, sorry we couldn't get to everyone. Just we had a ton of people registered and we just ran a little short on time. So again, I want to thank you, Paul, Solomon, for helping out with the questions. Paul, truly tremendous presentation. Thank you very much for doing that for us. And then I want to thank everyone out there who tuned in and attended this presentation, Novedge's Best of the Best webinar series. Just real quickly before we sign off, I want to give a little background on us here at Novedge. We're the leading online design software superstore. We have the best prices around. Our staff is extremely awesome. We would love for you to call, chat with us, talk about pricing, anything you're interested in. We have ZBrush for Windows and Mac. So if you're interested in either of those, definitely feel free, give us a call, shoot one of us an email. So having said all that, I think, Paul, Solomon, is there anything you guys want to say real quick before we sign off?
No, thanks everybody for coming.
No, thanks for coming, guys, and by all means, have fun. I know during the presentation I was just trying to cover as much as I can, so a lot of stuff was fast. By all means, if you have a particular question or, hey, where was that video, or what was that feature again, go ahead and send me an email. I'll be happy to point you in the direction or answer your questions. So, and thanks for coming, and happy ZBrush, and then keep putting that stuff up on ZBrush Central. We love seeing it, and it inspires us to keep creating our tools.
Yeah, so, and then a couple of people asked about recording of this webinar. It will be made available. I will make sure Paul has a recording so that he can put it on the website if they want to. It'll also be on our YouTube and Vimeo channels if either of you guys, any of them out there, subscribe to those. So it'll be out there. I'll also put it in the email I shoot to you guys as soon as the recording's done. So you'll be able to see it as many times as you want. So having said all that, we'll catch you guys next time.
Great. Thanks for coming, guys. Have a great day.